So last year, we took a little bit of a look at Bill Rieflin's one solo album, Birth of a Giant. And that album was, a collection of various songs that had Trey Gunn and Robert Fripp on several of the tracks. Well, when that album was recorded, there was also kind of a bunch of jammy byproduct tracks that came out of those sessions, and that's what this is. It's a collection of those tracks. During this time, Robert Fripp was really, really into improvisation. He always has been. But at this point in time, like King Crimson was kind of in these two in-between spaces. They were kind of half broken up, and he was very into understanding spontaneity in his music. So if you're into the very open-ended and kind of abstract improvisations, this album is all about that. And it's in that classic Robert Fripp style. But in this point in Robert Fripp's career, too, he was playing with some sounds that were different, like to the point where he almost had taken his guitar and his synthesizer guitar ambitions from the 80s had evolved into this point in his guitar playing, to where he's almost making his guitar sometimes sound like a piano, almost divesting it from any kind of actual guitar sound. I think that in recent years he's gotten away from that a little bit more, but really he was doing that a lot here, and that bled over into what would become his work with the Construction of Light and those albums in the aughts version of King Crimson. Also here you'll see Trey Gunn still like having to play the role of bass player, and I was always worried about Trey Gunn in the earlier iterations because I felt like he was sort of just trying to follow in Tony Levin's footsteps, but really that was out of necessity. He was being the accompanist to Robert Fripp, and Robert Fripp needed somebody to cover those bass strings. And it's unfortunate that so often stick players and people who play touch-style guitar kind of get put in that because of the background of the instrument. But at the same time, he's really, really great at it. And his particular style of playing touch style is a little bit different. He uses two hands, but not, this parallel thing that you see stick players do, or two different hand assignments. He's very just open-ended and he uses the two hands to make things sound very smooth. And also he gets into things, his own kind of sound experiments that are actually identifiably, as I've gone on to understand, that that's Trey Gunn's idiosyncratic way of doing stuff. He does these, like these kind of voice effect things where there's samples and he puts them through this processing. Those elements are there, and that's Trey Gunn. And of course, you can't overlook Bill Rieflin here, because this is before Bill Rieflin had any kind of real involvement officially with King Crimson, but clearly he was on a trajectory to end up in King Crimson whenever they reformed after the aughts. And we were talking about the 2010s version of King Crimson with a seven-headed beast, as they called it. He was definitely primed to step into the group at that point. But here, really, he was doing what was relevant for King Crimson at the time. By the time they got to the aughts version of King Crimson, they were doing a lot of looking back. They were kind of summarizing King Crimson's catalog. But here is really, really in sync with what Robert Fripp and Trey Gunn were doing. And the effect is great. I mean, he really could have just been the next King Crimson drummer. It wouldn't have been out of place for him or his style.